present the presentation today but had a family emergency. So we have Carmelie Hollingsworth standing in for her with the presentation. Any questions that you have that we cannot answer, we will take and email the answers to you next week. Get started.
So today we're going to talk about assisting your digital native in the blended learning environment. And I'm going to start with maybe a question. Now I have no younger people in here, but everybody here I assume has been born before 1996. So you're what we call a digital immigrant, and anybody that's been born since 1996 we call a digital native. That would be our children. So digital native is a term that was coined by Mark Prinsky in 2001. He's an American writer and speaker on learning and education. He originally kind of came up with it in an article to describe a new group of students in the educational environment, establishments. There's been controversy of which group of students this label describes, and so I think we've come to the conclusion. I actually was in a workshop not long ago, and they said 1999. So I guess it's somewhere in that time frame, 96, 99, that they would be a digital native if they were born then. So you guys know anything about blended learning environment? Any idea? It's a combination of two or more methods of training, and you have different combinations that you can use, such as classroom instruction with online instruction, using online instruction with access to a coach or a faculty member, and blending simulations with structured courses. The classroom instruction with online instruction would be maybe a virtual class that you could take while in the classroom. Your teacher would be there to guide you in that kind of thing. That would also be with the access to a coach or faculty member. They might not be there to help you through the class with instruction, but would be there to guide you with pacing or any help that you might need in navigating the computer and that kind of thing. And then the simulations thing would be an interesting, science, for example, would be lab work. And I think of biology because how many of you guys enjoyed really doing dissection and that kind of thing in the classroom? You did, you would like that. But we have tools now where you can do the dissection online and not have to actually do it, or vice versa. You could do some of the learning online and then do some, chemistry experiments and that thing in the lab, so you can use it both ways. The reason why we'd want to use blended learning is because brick and mortar, your schoolroom is familiar and comfortable to your students. It would be embedded during the school day, so you're not having to go home at a different time and do it after hours, in addition to your regular classes. You might have a teacher in the classroom to give support to the student. Teacher instruction be physically provided, and lab activities can be provided in the room, so that's kind of covering the topics I just spoke about. Any questions so far? Y'all with me? So going forward from here, do you have any idea what's offered in your own districts? No clue? Do you mind sharing?
No, ma'am. I mean, we have Florida Virtual in Collier County, which is Naples, during the school day, or students can take it after school and do the same thing. And then for your dissection, middle school will use Discovery Ed materials, so they do a lot of their labs through Discovery Ed.
Have you experienced it? You have students that are using it?
Both.
What do you think? You like it?
Yeah.
Anybody else have any idea? Since we're talking about online learning, is a course required for students? Is anybody aware that there is a required course if you entered 9th grade as of 2011-12, and if you're going towards a standard diploma? So this blended learning offers the students an opportunity to get that course taken care of without being responsible to do it on their own, and to still have support and some direct instruction from teachers if they need to. So you were saying they take it during the school day?
Some do, yes.
They can go to the library and take it. Some do that, I think.
Usually they have a computer lab set up in Naples anyway, and high school students will go. We offer it as low as elementary even, because they do critical thinking in elementary. So they have a lab situation, and then they usually have an aide or teacher in there with them.
Is this something like a web design class? Would that count?
I think so.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it could be anything. My project is the Resource Materials and Technology Center for Deaf, Hard of Hearing, but we're housed at the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind. And so 2 examples there would be the high school teacher does a deaf, hard of hearing, or a high school class on web design, and does it, also utilizes it through Gallaudet. So they work with them back and forth, and it gives them that college credit while they're still in high school in that way. And they also do something similar back in the blind department. They utilize Florida Virtual School, like what you're saying, to do in the classroom and online. So.
I know some teachers with virtual.
So our question here would be, what about students that have disabilities? So everybody needs to do the online course that's required for standard diploma. If a student can't access it, that can't be the reason why they don't take it. So if a student maybe isn't going for a standard diploma, they can still take that online course, but the reason why they wouldn't take it can't be because it wasn't accessible. Am I making any sense there? I might need to clarify a little bit. So if they had a disability that would keep them from accessing that online course, this district needs to make the accommodations to make it accessible if they want to take it, whether or not they're going after that standard diploma. So what we would want to do is review each year at your IEP meeting. And so you didn't have any idea what your district is doing, so if you have that student, then it might be something you want to start bringing up and say, what are the options? Is this child ready to do it or not do it? And you don't want to say that they aren't for the rest of their educational career. You want to go ahead and check every single year because they could develop those skills as they're going along. So, and you would want to think about what assistive technology might be needed.
I think even what classes they could take, because Florida Virtual keeps adding new classes. They have photography now. They're adding a boating one, so the kids can get their boating certificate as well. So I mean, there's a lot of classes that they're offering, but with the legislature cutting or sharing the pie, it's going to be interesting to see the districts and what they do. And Florida Virtual is going to be the answer for a lot of districts.
And I know a lot have set up their own county virtual schools that they utilize, and a lot of them might use Florida Virtual's curriculum, that same curriculum. So they have different options of how they might want to provide that. So when you're having that conversation, you want to think about what assistive technology might be needed and looking forward to taking those online courses for students with a disability, and our executive functioning skills needed. And I thought I knew what that was, so I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think executive functioning skills would be in this situation?
Decision making.
Okay.
Planning.
Planning
Time
would be a good one.
management.
Yeah, definitely. So giving them the opportunity to pace themselves, that might be something they need some help with. I work in collaboration with Fiddler Centers, if you guys are familiar with them, and they have some tech things, and we have another technology project. And one of the conversations that we're having, and I'm having to think about, I have a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old. And honestly, neither one of them have spent a lot of time on a computer. They spend their time on an iPhone, an iPad, a smart device, or on a controller. So they type with their thumbs. They type on the Xbox with their thumbs, and they touchscreen everything. So we're looking at new assessments where they would do stuff that's clicking and dragging and dropping, and I really honestly don't know that they have those skills to function kind of like we are. We've grown up with it. We've gone from a typewriter to a computer and learned these skills, but we've kind of bypassed that, I think, with some of our digital natives, in the sense that there's no reason for them to use a computer. So we're designing the test, and we're a little bit still behind even what they are doing with us. So it's an interesting concept to think about. So that would be kind of your executive functioning, the pacing, dragging and dropping, copying and pasting, keyboarding skills, all of those things that you may not even think about whether or not they have those or not. And they're not getting taught that necessarily. We're saying, here, have an online course, and they're jumping right into a course. Has anybody here taken an online course themselves? I did my bachelor's online, and my very first course, oh, thank you. My very first course was simply going through like personal discussion and writing some stuff, but it was to help you learn how to navigate their whole system and process. And I don't know that we have something similar like that for our students when we're putting them into this online world, in this educational environment. What do you think?
Well, Florida Virtual has online tutorials, so it runs them through tutorials so they're comfortable with running it. I think most classes that we take anyway as teachers does the same sort of thing if it's online.
Oh, good. I'm just curious as I start, thinking about it and was looking through this.
Well, even for the FCAT, they run the kids through a
Yeah.
simulator first. They know how to highlight and use the tools that are available to them before they take it.
And I think that's important. It is. When we do IEPs and accommodations and for testing, they have to utilize that on a regular basis in the classroom. And so as a parent, I'm saying they're not utilizing a computer in the classroom on a regular basis, and that, it doesn't seem to match up to me. So your IEP then, whenever you're thinking about the blended learning environment, might contain information about assistive technology, what you might need if, physical disability, that you might need certain kind of keyboard or a mouse, clickers, and that kind of thing. Accommodations could be someone helping with pacing to make sure that they stay on track, or setting up that schedule so that they know. I know with Florida Virtual, you can go the standard 16-week course, I think, or as quickly as 8 weeks and as slowly as 24 weeks. And I have one child that would do 8 weeks and the other one would do the 24, absolutely. But helping them do that, I don't know that they could come up with that schedule on their own, and so other students.
But it has it on, when you log in, it has a pace chart for those
Oh, yay.
specific scenarios.
So if you have an independent, worker that can handle that, but in the blended learning environment, then in the classroom situation, then they might have a support staff that is making sure they're keeping on that pace, making sure they've got their assistive technology, their accommodations. So it gives that an opportunity to develop those executive functioning skills before throwing them out there into the real world. So that would be a really big benefit of this blended learning environment. And collaboration would be important because when you have an online class, you have a teacher that's off-site teaching that class generally. And so if that student needs extra support, then whoever's in the classroom providing that support in the classroom, these two teachers need to be communicating to know where the student might be struggling at, what kind of accommodations and assistive technology needs to be. So something that you think about during your IEP meeting is, how is that going to work out? How is that going to look? And I had a train of thought there, and it just slipped right past my mind. So I want to go back to, I think, the requirement for a standard diploma if you enter ninth grade in 2011, 2012, and kind of elaborate a little bit more. So a student that isn't going for that standard diploma, or actually I think even with the standard diploma, if they have a disability, there can be a waiver to not have to take that online course. But what I want to make sure that I'm clear on is that as a parent, you used to work with that IEP team to every year reassess and reevaluate whether that child is ready. So it might not be something that they're never going to be able to do, but they might not be ready at whatever grade level and whatever. You were saying that you have elementary doing it, but some of those students may not be ready right then and there, but maybe in a year or two have developed some more of those skills from practice.
How does that requirement of taking the online class equate over to the private school situation? Do they also have to maintain that requirement? Or are they left to their own devices?
They follow under different.
So they have their own different guidelines?
Yes. And all based on the funding, correct?
As far as what type of evaluation are you talking about?
Well, the requirement for taking an online course.
It's going to depend on the private school and whether they're appropriate. You have to check into all those things and find out what's
I mean, he's already, in my personal situation, he's already in high school. He's already going to be going into junior year in the fall. So we're past that equivalent. I'm just wondering, anybody coming in, though.
Because they don't have to follow the same guidelines as a school district in Florida. Those children don't have to pass the test for the children, so you need to check with the private school.
Yeah, okay.
So are you all pretty comfortable with the difference between the online blended environment and a virtual school piece? Okay. Are there any questions? I probably went through speedy because, again, not my presentation, but I'm learning too. Interesting stuff to think about. I'm hoping that gave you guys some information. information, but she wouldn't have time for you guys to have discussions and questions, and as Amy said, she will take back the questions if we can't answer them, so. Did you miss
Well,
anything, or?
The online learning community is what sparked my interest.
Okay.
And I would like to implement some things at home, access some online learning communities. As a substitute teacher, sometimes when I was going to a class, I'm amazed at what the kids access, and they go into the little hubs and what they can do. And I feel like when I get her home, she's a senior in high school. She goes to Barbie and makes hairstyles. And so that's why I came. I don't know if I'm in the right place for that kind of information.
I think so, and she might have had that. We don't have any kind of a state type at this point.
If they're not in class, they can't hook on to the thing. You can't do it from home ever.
I think it would depend on what the district was utilizing as their online course, their piece.
Well, just even if it wasn't hooked on to that, I thought maybe we'd have some resources that would be for a Down syndrome or for, learning disabled that can't really keep up on a board. My boys did FLDS, and they did great on it. I love FLDS. So maybe they have something, so I wrote that down.
Okay.
And I know they do, as long as you share the IEP information for the virtual held under that same guidelines, they have to follow it. And we do have ESC support staff to help
good.
help support the teachers through all of this.
And I know on the deaf section or end of it, we've thought about trying to create something like what you're speaking of and haven't made a lot of progress, but I don't know if there's parent groups that might have already started something like what you're talking about. So I will ask around too, if you want to, I'll give you my card and then we can ask around and see what we can find out. I'm not Leanne.
Oh.
She had a family emergency, so I'm
What's
filling
your
in for
name?
her. Carmelina.
Oh, thanks.
Sure. And I'll give you a card before you leave.
Well, I've got somebody watching her, so I need to check on
Okay.
her and my, I can keep this number that's reached for.
Yeah, she can get you in touch with me.
for-
Oh, Amy's got one, she'll get it to you. And Amy's our parent person from the Department of Education, so if you have anything you need, you can contact Amy. Anything else? I know, just to make sure, is there anything that you wanted out of this that maybe I didn't cover?
Yeah, I was looking for apps, because we're going to bring your own devices in Fire County. So I want to know how to incorporate, I'm sure our district will eventually get to this, and they may already have plans in place and just not contribute to those, but how are we going to get these kids who are ESE or even typical children, what apps are a good thing to have and use?
And we can help you with that too, and I can put you in contact with, there's some school districts that have already, and I don't know if you're thinking about how to implement the app system and the bring your own devices. I'm assuming your tech people probably have,
Well, that's
Thought about it.
right. Yeah, they have a whole plan in place. Wasn't able to.
so
get
you'll
it.
perhaps, yeah.
Tell me, I'll forward it to them. Sure, I'll be
Yeah.
back in the office Monday.
Thank you. The Fiddler Centers, and if you go down to the exhibit hall, you'll see some different,
She's looked at
and
the
she
website
knows
on
stuff.
that.
I know, I recognize her. So if you go by the NTSS booth, which is a multi-tiered system of supports, they've got a nice flyer with a lot of good apps, and because you can get overwhelmed, so they've got some stuff really
Well, I want
narrowed
to make sure,
down.
yeah, and I'm sure our district's using that as well.
Yeah.
Well, I know one thing, the high school my son is in Miami, they went to all their kids having iPads at the start of this year that we just finished. And one of the biggest problems I had from it, they didn't really have a clear-cut support system if they ran into problems, either hardware-wise or software-wise. The other thing that I found out that they didn't really discuss at the beginning is each individual teacher for each class did their own thing. There was no standardization across the board that we want to use this particular application to read all the textbooks. Every single teacher had their own little app that they wanted to use. So you ended up having duplicates across the board, and it made it for a very uncertain year, and this is the first year they did it. So I know we had a lot of issues.
Memory.
And it's going to be interesting, like with the accessibility of the different programs.
Well, we're already having issues
I
with
mean-
connectivity just in the classroom computers, so I can't wait to see what this is going to be.
It opens, I deal with computer networks in my job, and the whole idea, I mean nationwide, and let alone just connectivity issues like you say, each device is different. And the restrictions of what you have are required, and being able to, one, make it safe from an antivirus perspective, from a malware perspective and locking it down, they only get to where they need to get to and not where they're not supposed to be. So all those issues come into play.
A lot of manpower that goes in there. And
Oh,
lot
quite a
of
bit.
cost.
Unless they have a very well thought out plan that they can execute.
Was it a paperless system when they implemented the iPad?
Pretty much. There were a few kids that, of course, could not afford it because we actually had to buy the iPads themselves as well as the textbooks, and the prices on them were.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now this is sorry, this is something completely different. This is our particular school that our son went to, but the prices that were involved were like 3 times what they were on a street to buy an iPad. It was like $1,500, and a couple of $100 of that were the textbooks for the e-textbook.
The textbook apps, they were already.
The textbooks were made available, but there were issues actually even getting to the textbooks initially for the first 4 or 5 weeks of school, which was a real fun piece. And the teachers, like I said, were doing their own things and being able to read them or to work around to try to get at them. So there were a lot of pieces that were missed, at least in this particular school instance. I know from a public school standpoint, I hope I've worked with some of their technical folks on other projects for my company, and they're pretty much on the ball, but I hope they cover all their bases, especially when you do the bring your own device. So that.
It's already a pilot for
Mhm.
paperless system, not so much the regular plastic, pilot for the paperless system with a couple of our grade levels.
Mhm.
And we just use a couple of apps, and everything becomes a PDF, and the student has their own email account, that's all
Mhm.
good, Dropbox, and every student has your backpack, an iPad, and a stylus, and a tiny, instruction.
How was, what grades?
One to the fifth grade,
How did the kids treat the computers?
not one of them.
Because we did it in middle school, 6 through 8. They got a laptop bag, carried it class to class, and they had to park it somehow back in homeroom, and they were damaged right and left.
I think that's that middle school.
Mentality, yeah. Well, if there's no investment, they're not gonna take care of them. So
Right.
you having to pursue no offense, they're gonna be more careful.
Well, the problem we had too was since it was a Catholic school system, they were more worried about locking down the cameras in it and not letting the kids use the cameras to take pictures or videos. So they were more concerned about the case rather than the protection of the iPad. My wife and myself were lobbying, let us get the OtterBox thing for the iPad, let us protect it. No, you can't do that, you can't do that. Finally, about two-thirds of the way through the school year, they let us. And the school, for whatever reason, finally unlocked the camera.
Okay, so no case. These
No,
were iPads that had
they
no case.
they had iPads with a small little thing. We have to buy them. We're financially responsible for them, and we get them when they graduate. But now, of course, it's going to be 3 years obsolete because this wasn't even the greatest version of the iPad. It was 2 versions ago is what they were selling. So yeah, we had a lot of issues in this particular school to sort out, and we didn't like a lot of them. So.
It's good to hear different experiences. How did the pilot go, do you know?
But we're still doing it,
Still doing
we're
it?
pushing it out, into the high school, but there's one, we're doing it, still doing it at high school. And it's gonna be the same concept, but the entire population for that little cluster will be typically placed as well. And then we're pushing it out to more grade levels.
What district are you in? Do you mind sharing?
Black.
Blair. So they're a smaller district too.
Well, they're a
so
smaller
that might
district
allow a
and-
little more.
And it sounds like they've got a more regimented plan. It's, considering it being in PDF format, it makes it a lot easier to handle. You can have one application to read it, the Adobe Reader, to read it rather than manipulate it. There are a lot of things that make it streamlined and more regimented that makes it easier to support and operate. So.
And if that goes well, then there's lots of technology that you can utilize.
They did with
That
that,
was
they
like a
didn't want any of the teachers that aren't tech savvy to go, great, I gotta use another app or
Right.
another device or another thing that I'm not tech savvy with to begin with, other than what I use in my classroom. And they just wanted to make it very easy and streamline the whole process.
That's good to hear.
Interesting stuff, isn't it? So again, they're skipping that computer keyboard skills and keys.
I don't know. I finally got my first company smartphone. I'm having to learn that for the first time, and I've been dealing with computer networks and computers for 30 years. So there is a learning curve from my perspective. But the other thing with my son, he did have, or still does have, fine motor issues that back in, I think, the 3rd or 4th grade, we got him his first keyboard, a Neo. And that's how he turned in his assignments. He typed them all out. We even went to the point where we bought printers, 3 or 4 of them, and put them in the individual classrooms. So he didn't have to go somewhere, bring it home to print it out. You just walked up, we left the cables there, and he plugged it in, printed off his assignment, and then get handed in.
And they're still good for certain kids.
Oh yeah, no, they're excellent.
Population that-
Exactly, excellent. The problem I had with him going to the iPad, not only the way it was presented to us, at least with a couple of teachers, one in particular, his English teacher, was they would set up a folder structure within the iPad. They would do the assignments. It would be stored in the iPad, and they'd hand the iPad to the teacher, and she would double check to see whether the assignment was there and grade it on it that way. Or he could email it to the teacher, which they could also do, and she would check it and make sure everything was fine. He had to come home, print it, take it back to the school the next day, and half the time he would not put it back in his backpack, and he'd get a minus or a 0 for the homework because he didn't turn it in. And no
That
consistency
sounds
across.
like an implementation issue there.
Yeah, it's something that was no consistency across the classes.
Right.
They all did their own thing. So that was the biggest problem.
This is Leanne's information. She's the program liaison at the Florida Department of Education. She manages the discretionary projects that work with visual impairments, deaf, hard of hearing. What am I missing? I know the educational interpreter project. She's got a handful of other ones. That's her specialty. And the name and information below is Sally Roberts with the Florida Public Virtual Schools. So if you're interested more in the total virtual piece of it, then you would want to talk with her.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Carmelina, for standing in for Leanne. At the department, we're always readily available, so do not hesitate to call or email Leanne or myself if you'd like a card. I do parent services for the Bureau of Exceptional Education and student services for the Department of Education. But we are public servants, and we are here to answer questions and to assist as we can. And if we don't know the answer, we always try to find it for you or connect you with someone who can provide you with the answer.
Yeah, they are very nice. I call them all the time. Thanks, you guys.
Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you for doing this.